Hey, welcome everybody. You're here with Chase and I. We are One Fuel Swoop, and we have a lot to talk about tonight. So let's get to it. We're going to talk about the KeystoneXL pipeline. We're going to talk about that oil pipeline that some people want and some people don't. And we're going to tell you why and some of the pros and cons. And I'm going to kick it over to my buddy Chase, and he is going to start the show. Chase?
Thanks, Melanie, and thank you, listeners, for joining us this evening. So we're going to be discussing the KeystoneXL pipeline, kind of an overview of that, right? So getting into this, I had no clue what was going on with the KeystoneXL pipeline. Was it complete? Is there an extension underway? So part of the fun, I got to research that and come to find out. So apparently there's a company called TransCanada, and the KeystoneXL pipeline is actually a proposed extension of an existing pipeline. And I guess the whole purpose of the extension is to enable the transport of oil sands crude, which that's something else I had no clue about. The pipeline is supposed to move that from Canada and then also bring in shale oil produced in North Dakota and Montana down to, I guess, a hub in Nebraska, and then move on to refineries in the Gulf Coast. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the oil sands themselves. I guess they're commonly referred to as tar sands, I guess, in the business. But what that essentially is, though, for our listeners, is a mixture of sand, clay, water, something called bitumen. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it is apparently it's very important. And apparently out of all of this, Canada, I guess, has one of the largest deposits of oil sands anywhere in the world. And so the whole purpose of this pipeline is to help shift that stuff down here to the U.S. and to the rest of the world. So Melanie, what were you able to find out about this?
Well, first of all, I think that the one thing we neglected to do is to properly pronounce bitumen, because I'm hoping that maybe it's vitamin. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. A lot of pipe, a lot of miles, and a lot of barrels of that mixture of sand, clay, and other minerals going through that pipeline.
Bitumen. So I was able to confirm, at least
yeah.
according to the Google machine. Yeah, so I think we're spot on with bitumen. You mentioned the...
Did you stop and look to see what that is exactly while you had that?
Well, no, I did not, since you put me on the spot on the air, but it is... yeah, it's important to tar sands, Melanie.
Okay.
No, so the pipe you mentioned, right? You mentioned that's interesting, right? Like it's going through this kind of like lower populated area. So I was reading, it's apparently over 800 miles of pipe, and the pipe that they're talking about for this extension is 3 feet in diameter. So that, I mean, you're talking, that's pretty substantial. And I guess I'm not sure if some of it's below ground, all of it's above ground. I think there's like a mix in there. But apparently it requires like a presidential level permit from the State Department to even approve this extension. Now, apparently all of that's already been done. There's they had to do a determination, I guess, that the extension was in the national interest. I guess as a part of that, I guess they had to look at not only the environmental impacts that you had mentioned, right? If we're talking about aquifers, if we're talking about maybe the piece of the eyesore, maybe that involves, tax appraisals on homes, all that stuff goes into it. And I guess they balance and weigh that against the energy security of the nation to determine whether or not a project like this needs to go forward.
It represents just under a third of the entire project, as you alluded to. We've got the Keystone project in its entirety that takes this oil all over the country. But now we just want to make kind of a straight shot down to the Gulf. And they want to do it right through one of the least populated, arguably most preserved part of the country, because we don't have a lot of things going on in those areas between South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and then into Texas. And I probably make a lot of people mad saying that, because there are things. I mean, I can see a Dairy Queen across the street. So we do have some things, but we're talking about the sand hills. We're talking about a lot of area that's ranch land, farmland that, doesn't have a lot of people in the way, but it does have some of that, one of the world's largest aquifers right there underneath. So again, this is kind of a small thing when it comes to the whole Keystone project. And so we're wondering, our research is making us ask, why
has this taken years and years and years to get this through? Apparently, we found the part of the country that is kind of, not wanting to be a part of this project, right? I mean, does that sound right to you?
A vast majority of the Keystone Pipeline is actually already shipping hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude from Canada to all over the U.S., down even into the southern U.S. border in some instances.
Of course, the biggest issue in this, I'm going to keep going back to this, is that Ogallala Aquifer. We're kind of spoiled here in Nebraska. We have that, drinking water. You can just pour it right out of your tap and drink it, and it's some of the best tasting. And arguably, it's not even an argument. It's been tested to be the best water, in the country. So we really want to put that, 880,000
barrels of oil. Yeah.
Look that up. Yeah. 830,000 barrels a day going over the top of our aquifer. I mean, is it really worth the risk? So, we've got the benefits, but we've also certainly got those concerns. And so people along the way are constantly, fighting this, and we're seeing this showing back up in court, and it's costing money that way as well.
What I was curious about, the two main benefits that are often kind of referenced for the Keystone extension. So two main ones that I've discovered, right? So the first one, right, that people reference frequently, whether it's in writing, research commentary, opinion pieces, it's the energy security piece, right? There's a lot of, especially, we're right in the middle of an election season, hotly contested.
The government in place right now, they understand the need for this economy to grow. They understand the need to get that oil to the people in this country so that we don't have to depend on other nations for our fuel, just as one example. And they want to see that it serves the national interest, because like you mentioned, there's 800 people-ish in this area, and there's, small towns all across the area. But this pipeline would benefit the entire nation. And we're talking like New York and, all the big cities where all the population is. So I think it's controversial because the people that have this quiet little part of the world, they want it to be left alone.
So there's a lot of emphasis put on foreign policy, and a big part of that is kind of, whether it's true or not, right? That depends on how well read the listeners are, but a big part of that is concern over where the U.S. gets its energy from, primarily its crude oil, right? And so one of the arguments in favor of the Keystone XL extension is that this will allow us to bring in more oil from maybe what would be more of our traditional allies, right, such as Canada. And to decrease kind of our oil imports from more volatile countries, maybe in South America, right? Or definitely some of our, potentially adversarial or at best lukewarm allies in the Middle East. So that was one of the key benefits that was referenced. Another one is the kind of continual kind of drum of this will create jobs, right? Certainly, pipe laying is outside of my skill set. I can imagine it takes, a solid fundamental understanding of a particular skill set to do that.
I'm going to interrupt you
right.
for a second on that note, because a lot of people are saying that it's going to create a lot of jobs, and there is a controversy about even that, saying, some person said it was going to do like 5,000 jobs. Other people are saying it's going to be closer to 50, because just like what you said, it's a very specified skill set. So that's
for sure. Yeah, I was, and it's interesting you quoted those two numbers specifically, because I saw 20,000 jobs kind of quoted here and there as well. So there definitely doesn't seem to be a clear-cut case for how many jobs is this actually gonna create, and then you get into the discussion of how do you measure created jobs, right? So definitely with this, it seems like whether it's on the definitive, like pro cons, maybe on the more environmentally concerned side of it, or if you're on the foreign policy or the economic side of this pipeline, it seems like almost every fact is kind of surrounded by controversy, right? Like, how are you going to measure the jobs created? How do you properly examine the exact potential environmental risk to something that really hasn't had a large environment impact to this point, because it's proposed or in the process of being built out. There's a lot of valid discussion on both sides, whether you're for or against the Keystone XL extension, and really the only thing that we can without a doubt I think agree on, right, is there's going to be some impact to the locals, right? Whether it's positive versus negative, maybe that depends on your perspective and how you view things, right? But regardless, people that live in these smaller communities, they're without a doubt they're going to have pipe laid through their community, whether it's under the ground, above ground. We've done this research, we've discussed this topic in depth. What's your ultimate kind of outcome? What is the Judge Melanie say on the KeystoneXL extension, right? Is this going to be a net positive or a net negative for the United States in your mind?
Well, I have to separate emotion from this also and look
For
at
sure.
these that have been done. And I know that truly the demographics in Nebraska are, it's certainly benefiting more people than live
I
here.
think we're kind of on the same page here, where we both agree that the jury's still out, so to speak. There's obviously, like you had mentioned, there's going to be jobs that are going to come and go, right? As the pipeline is built and it moves on, right? Obviously, well-paying jobs are always a benefit for a community, right? Is that offset by the disturbances to the community? Is the cost of the pipeline in general, is that offset by the money made on crude oil imports from Canada for the businesses involved, right? Is the overall controversy, right, in this country over the pipeline, is that even really outweighed by the potential strategic benefits, right, of being able to rely less, right, on Middle Eastern or South American oil and rely more on friendly Canada? I think really each lens that you view this problem set through, if you're able to look through those different lenses, you can see valuable perspectives on each side. Which for me, my ultimate my conclusion on this topic really is, I'm torn on the pros and cons of it. I definitely recognize the strategic implications and the strategic benefit, but then at the same time, I'm also keen to recognize the environmental impacts and to empathize with the smaller towns that would be impacted. So for me, I'm kind of torn on it one way or the other. I don't know that I would have done anything differently, considering what I know, but I don't know. I don't know if I'd be able to go against it. I don't know. It's interesting.
So what I think that I know in my head that this is the kind of thing that our country is not going to be able to avoid. I think it's something that is something that we have to do.
Absolutely. And I think your point is probably the best note to end on for our listeners is ultimately all of these controversial environmentally impacting projects such as KeystoneXL and many others. The key to that is to have, grown up adult conversations where you can exchange opinions on it and then come to a compromise, right? Maybe that compromise is moving a pipeline around an aquifer. Maybe that is understanding the national implications of something, even if maybe have the small town perspective and that's all you see. So that's also, I think, what I would encourage our listeners to do as we depart out of this show for tonight is share your thoughts, right? Hit us on Twitter, hit us in the YouTube comments, whatever your podcast platform of choice is, and let us know what you think on this. What do your friends think?
Because talking is the best way that we're going to find a solution for these kind of situations.
Absolutely.
We may not have it all together in one fell swoop, Chase, I guess. Maybe one fuel swoop needs a little bit more input before we can have this be finalized. What do you think?
Exactly. Thanks to our listeners for joining us tonight. One Fuel Swoop will be here every Wednesday for the next hour, and you'll have to tune in and let us know what you think.
That's right. Thanks so much for joining us. Take care.
Bye.